to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be looking at my Verus Engineering front splitter that's actually designed for a Mustang 350, but I put it on the Mustang GT. I'm going to show you how I did it and what modifications that I had to do to get it. We have three bolts on each side holding the splitter up, as well as the stays, so technically 4 if you count the stay as a bolt, and that's what we have holding the entirety of the splitter up. It's very centered around the front leading edge as well as center. Obviously the dead center is not supported, but just each side of that, and that gives us the ability to have a very stable splitter that isn't going anywhere. And like I said, tested it up to about 130 Big Willow, it stayed put. So I feel really confident in the splitter staying where it should be. Let's rip it off right now. Give you a look underneath. Alright, so this is the top of the splitter. This is the factory under tray. And as you can see, this is actually pushing directly up onto this and kind of shoving it up a little bit. Not quite ideal. I was actually debating if I wanted to put some spacers up in the front, which would let it kind of sit lower in the front, because the back is pushing the front up, which is putting it into a condition where it's not quite ideal. So I'd like to put some spacers up in front to tilt it down, and then put a fence all the way across the front end, and that would really help the dynamic of keeping that splitter flat or turned down ever so slightly. But for now, the stays are doing that job and just pushing down really hard to ensure that it stays where it needs to be. All right, let's take it apart a little bit more. So to give you some idea, I had to cut this hole, and the reason why is to get right there into that hole on the mount. This actually has a raised portion that wouldn't let this go all the way up, so that's why that had to be cut out. Very small cutouts at the end of the day to make that work. And then obviously here, having cut a little bit off the lip and a hole there for that very forward mount. Simple, but yet effective. On the far, this is the very far corner, so a little cutout and a drilled hole. So for all intents and purposes, I could easily take the splitter off and drive around and still have this nice splash shield, everything there. You could potentially, I could have taken the plastic from here and done like some plastic weld job and just left a little hole here, and it literally would be the most easy situation that it is basically removable, and I could put it back and simple easy. So now, just like how you would always do this, we take out the 100 screws that this has, as well as all the poppets, which are super awesome. Because they're everywhere. So just like it does stock, this just slides out and releases all the dirt right onto your face, which is awesome. And now it reveals the mounts. So this right here is the important part of this splitter. So this is the mount supplied by Verus Engineering, which is actually pretty ingenious. It's actually made to sit lower so that you could use their fence and some other stuff. So what I opted to do was make this even with this front subframe rail or frame rail. This is what really makes in my opinion, this is probably what really makes this work, because if you just bolted this into here using the riv nuts, the likelihood of that pulling out is going to be exponentially greater than anything else. So this is actually a bolt that goes through a hole just like this on either side So it's a really long bolt. You can see here. So really long bolt that goes all the way through that allows this piece. So as weight is being pulled here, it has to pull the frame rail. So the likelihood of this falling is virtually impossible unless you really do some crazy stuff. Now, with that, you actually have to bolt. You actually have to bolt this all together. Now, I had to get a little janky here with some washers, but it does work. If I wanted to go back and redo that, what I would really be looking to do is to make an entire plate that would go inside of here, like a rectangle plate. That would really make the biggest difference to not allow this to pull out. Otherwise, we're kind of relying on those washers, although those washers would take a lot of force for this to pull out. And I was thinking about it when I did it, and I said, well, I'd rather have this pull out and this piece rip out than it rip off like my whole front end. So kind of baking in like a little bit of breaking point factor, that probably wouldn't be a bad idea. Other than that, you know, big thing is, like you've already seen, this can now fit onto the S550 chassis that's not a 350. Mainly that's because the fascia is all different, which this is different, so you can't really use a lot of the other pieces. Now, something you can see just right here, so you notice here, I had to shave a bunch of material off of that right there to allow it to fit. By trimming this out, I was able to make it all fit under the bumper. You see, this thing is taller than you think it is. It goes from all the way up here, all the way down. Now I'm only using about this much of the material, so that kind of top piece is kind of worthless, but obviously I couldn't cut it because I didn't want to take all the material off of the top, which would not allow it to the fulcrum factor. So I wanted to leave as much as possible. You know, a little extra material isn't going to hurt it, but if I took too much off, then I could have screwed myself. So going back to this, you know, going back to this side, so again, you see it goes all the way up to the top here, down, forward. Also, you can see here I had to trim a lot off the nose right to the point where I could have left more, but I didn't want to have this peeking out too far. I didn't want to have this peeking out too far here. It just didn't make any sense. So I just rounded that out and kind of brought it back. I could have easily, you know, if this hole wasn't here, I could have drilled a hole further back. Obviously, I could have just made my own whole front mount basing it off this design, but I had these pieces from the kit, so I decided to use them, and I thought they looked really nice, fit the car. They're all nicely powder coated or whatever they are, so they weren't going to rust and do any weird stuff. I had to put a little piece right here, which I cut off from the other piece, just to give that a little bit of spacing. Piece here, I had to trim it there. So this piece actually is, again, part of all this. They all go together and bolt to the car here, and again, being held by this piece here. This puts out this arc, and again, had to trim a little bit here. Tried to be pretty sparing because I wanted to have as much material as possible. But here, this is where that far out kick that holds the splitter from any downward force here. So you have this entire span that goes down to here. Really cool design by Verus, allowing this piece to support a lot of the splitter. The only real negative is this side here. There's nothing holding this. So that's what I'm gonna try to work on at a later date. But you can kind of see there's just not much up there. There's not any real like metal or anything. You'd have to come off of the actual frame rail up there to come down to here, which you have things in the way, all sorts of stuff, you know, or you'd have to do something off of here to span or something of that nature, which maybe just like a piece of flat plate that could span here to here, and that would give it some rigidity, but I haven't figured that out yet. What I want to do is build an end plate here that will rest right here. That helps capture that air. It makes the splitter more effective, which is awesome. I'm actually debating if I want to do some sort of spat, although this does have the air curtain, as you can see here, that pushes air around the tire. I just don't know how effective it is with wider tires. So I might just do a spat and cover this up, or I might just try to go here, leave the opening here. So the spat is working on the outside, yet the air curtain is working on the inside. It could be good, could be bad. I'm no aerodynamicist, that's for sure. As you can kind of see, guys, there's holes. Those holes are for the OEM, or for the 350, so that you can mount a fence here. As you can see, I do not have a fence, and at certain times, especially in the middle of the splitter, it does need a fence, which is why I was talking about doing some spacers, getting the splitter more level, and actually creating a little fence here, which would probably be very short and very tapered. I might not even need one toward the back here, but this is one of the problems that I have with the splitter, is I need to get this splitter really attached here at the back end if I wanted to do anything with end plates or anything of that nature. But if you do that, I can run an end plate that's kind of an L and have it come into here and find a mounting point here, which it might just be this poppet, crazy enough, because the force isn't going to be hyper drastic, I don't believe. Verus did share with me they make really cool things that might work out really well for this situation, which are basically like a riv nut that goes into plastic. So that might be a great solution to this, is put a riv nut into the back piece here. But as I said before, one of the issues that I have is if I do that, now the splitter itself is directly attached to the bumper. So if anything happens, you could rip stuff out. Now, granted, it's to this kind of flimsier plastic on the inside of, you know, the wheel well, so it would likely rip this out well before it ripped anything to do with the bumper, which is exactly what I want. Again, kind of building in a breakaway factor, so if it rips off, it's ripping off stuff I don't really care about, and we can just move on and just keep running the car just without a splitter, which would suck, but not as bad as a broken car. But yeah, you can see it looks beautiful. It absolutely is. And obviously having to make this from a splitter designed for the 350 is, you know, it never was going to be perfect, but I wanted to try it out. I thought it looked great, has a good profile, everything looks good on it, and it's very durable. You can kind of beat this against stuff and it doesn't just break away, fall apart. So I really like it for that. Again, I would like to modify this slightly just to get some extra downforce out of it, because I did find out very quickly the rear wing is in a situation where that can generate a lot more downforce than the splitter itself. So something I didn't touch on while we were under the car is the stays. So the stays here, as you can see, I kind of countersunk the bolt and the washer just to make that a little bit easier so it doesn't rip off. The stay here, it goes up into the bumper itself, and there's actually the bumper beam, and it has a riv nut in there, which then attaches to the stay, which attaches to this fancy little guy here, which makes it really easy. I just like using pins, makes it really easy to push out, put in, and so on and so forth. Some people like the ones that kind of latch around. These ones work great. They stay without any issue. Been using them on the Subaru, on the Miata, with no issue whatsoever. Again, I countersunk down here just to make it so that this didn't rub off. I actually need to put some rub plates underneath this to ensure that we don't rub this splitter. Although it's not like carbon, where if you rub it, you can essentially deform the carbon so it won't have any structural rigidity. This is kind of nice that it won't do that. Alright, so now you've seen how I modified the mounting brackets and got it all mounted on the GT in comparison to the 350. So a big part of this is simply, Aero is a balance. The rear wing and the front splitter have to work together to create the aero balance of the car. So putting the splitter on was a key component for me to get the car to where I really wanted it to be. Aesthetically also, the front splitter definitely gives it a more aggressive look, and really what I wanted out of the car. But a big thing being, I really wanted the aero balance. The balance is the key factor here. The front splitter has an adjustment with the rods. We can tilt it forward, up and down to give more downturn or up. Obviously if the splitter is up, you're actually going to start creating a little bit of lift in your front end, so you want to make sure it's tilted ever so slightly down or even. On the rear wing, a big thing is obviously you have a ton of adjustment in the rear wing, and always keep in mind ride height, rake, all of those things play into your aero balance and how you're going to effectively manage your aero. A big thing for me was putting the front splitter on really gave the front end more bite. It was very much missing that. I did run the car with just the rear wing for a little bit, just to get the impressions of what the rear wing did for the car, which it did improve some high-speed stability, but obviously it induced a lot of understeer in those high-speed situations as well. So that was a big part of putting the front splitter on, completing the balance of the car. And that's where for me, now I still have another road to travel. So what you're gonna see next out of the whole front end of the car and the splitter itself is, as of right now, there's no end plates. There's no actual like capture of air on the outsides. Actually, as you saw in the mounting underneath the car, the sides are actually pretty weak in terms of stability. So I still have to build something in there to create that, a mounting bracket or something of that nature. Still working on it. Obviously, this is a modification in progress type thing. But overall, just wanted to touch base and let you guys understand the difference that having that front splitter on the car with the rear wing, with the entirety of the car, what that really did to the car. Lap times wise, I basically was easily able to see that there was an advantage, obviously, because now the front end bites more, you're able to have more confidence in those corners, you're not understeering as much. Lap time wise, didn't really get to see that at Button Willow. I did go faster than I ever did, but the clutch blew out before I could really get to that happy place. Same tire, same everything else in the car, with just the only difference of the splitter. My expectation was a second to a second and a half delta. Really didn't get the chance to really get there. Big Willow, I was able to go out and get some impressions, but again, didn't put down a hot lap. Just didn't have time throughout that day to really do that. Although without trying anywhere near as hard, while taking passengers and just having a good time, basically was able to get very close to my fastest lap in this car from previous. So that tells me right there that there's definitely more speed to be had. And again, I'm definitely thinking a second to a second and a half delta from no splitter to splitter. And that's what you want to see when you buy these performance parts, is
time going down, car being faster, you having more confidence in the car. That's probably the biggest thing for me. The front splitter gains that front end confidence, which allows you to drive in harder. Obviously understeers there at times so that it can help you and let you slow down before you end up in a situation where you go off. And obviously understeer can also induce you to go off, but it can be the warning sign to tell you to slow down, you're going too fast into a corner, and dial it back. But again, the splitter itself was a massive improvement on the car, and I'm really happy with it. So, alright guys, I'm going to give you some more modifications and more things coming up on this splitter at a later date, so stay tuned.